Hi guys, my name is Jo Rogers and I'm the founder of NaviStar Legal. And today I have Sarah Ouis, and she is the legal counsel at MD Group. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jo, for having me.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone.
We've been connected a while, right? And I love your LinkedIn posts, and so it's why I connected with you, because of some of the stuff you've been doing in the legal profession. And we'll come on to that in a minute. But first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about, that question when you're about to train and they're like, who are you and why law? Why did you pick law? What was it that drove you, and how come you're still working in the legal profession? Tell me about you.
I mean, to be honest, if I was to generally answer to that question in an interview for a law firm, I wouldn't have had a job at all. So my journey to law has been very, initially I wanted to do HR, right? And I was like, okay, let's go into, let's study into something that would give you a job. So let's start with studying in law school, and then eventually you will be able to specialize in employment law and then be able to work in HR. So I've always been really interested in connecting with people, working with people. And that's the whole point of obviously me willing to do HR. And then eventually when I arrived in law school, I kind of got familiar with maybe more commercial, corporate, legal related matters. And I was like, well, actually it's, it seems quite interesting as well. And I think at that point, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do in the long term, but I eventually come across the in-house legal counsel route. So on one hand, really, I wanted to work with people. On the other hand, I had an interest in commercial and corporate law. And I was like, well, maybe the in-house legal profession could be great for me. And this is basically, long story short, how I ended up working in-house for the past 4 years now, a bit more. So I did qualify in France, and I've been working in the UK for the past 4 years.
And you had a quite an unusual start to your career, didn't you? Like, tell us a little bit about that, because I love hearing people that have had a slightly, I was going to say skewed. It's not skewed because that makes it sound like, but just a non-direct. What happened? So you qualified in France, and then how did you end up in the UK?
It's a very interesting story as well. So the way it all came up. So really, just to give you a bit of an insight here, I never really wanted to go even to London for a weekend, right? So living in the UK has never been a thing for me, but I graduated in law school. I didn't necessarily like law school, or what we were. I guess I didn't necessarily agree with the way we were taught about legal related matters. Now, I guess I had no choice, and I was like, okay, well, the in-house legal route could be great for me. So I did I completed my degree in France. I got all of my experiences, because in France you have to do a couple of internships to be able to qualify. So this is what I did. And I think when you study law, I guess there is some sort of cliche by which, the world is waiting for you. I guess no one is really prepared of, no one really expects the reality to hit that hard. And this is what happened to me, irrespective of all all the experiences that I have done. I couldn't find a job in France. I could have found a job, but it was like to do credit control, like things that were not interesting for me at all.
Not exactly people focused, which is what you had originally wanted to do. So it would make sense that that's not really where you want to go. Yeah,
absolutely correct. So I couldn't really find a job that was suitable for me, and this is where I started to explore legal opportunities abroad, because I was like, if I can't find something in France, then fine, I will try elsewhere. So I eventually started to look for internships and jobs in multiple countries. And I came across an internship in London. So a couple of months after graduation, I was like, great, that's it. And I wanted to develop my English as well. And I was like, that's it for me. I will be able to go there, have a legal internship, which hopefully will open other doors for me. So that was a couple of months after I graduated. So I had been unemployed. And then I arrived in the UK in March 2015. And at the time, I found out that this internship that I was meant to do ended up being a scam.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's, whenever I tell the story, people, are kind of in a bit of a shock, but also, they also question, how is that even possible? How would someone end up, finding a fake internship?
Right. And moving an entire, moving countries for it as well, which is a huge big deal to do that. But of course, when you're excited about something, you're less likely to think, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll go and have a look. I'll go and just do all my due diligence on this person. You don't, you're like, right, I'm in, both feet in. Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect something like that to go wrong. The internship was unpaid. For me, I was like, that's fine. I will do, like a part-time job on the side. I would make it work. And I mean, how would someone create a fake legal internship? So basically, the person who did that in the first place was looking for free legal services and was willing to hire a law student to work on his case.
A law student who wasn't qualified in the country. I mean, that's relatively, oh, wow.
This is unbelievable.
Learn from that. I think, I'm interested in that story. It's not, I mean, it is obviously people can be real idiots, but it's not really that. It's how you manage then to deal with it, because that's quite a big blow to, you're already kind of at a low point. It's a big blow to your, I don't know whether it's ego or just to your self-esteem. How did you manage to deal with that? Or did that kind of give you the fire to move on? What happened?
I mean, it was very difficult. I won't be, I can't lie about it. It was very difficult at the time because, first of all, I would like to remind that obviously I was unemployed for a while in France. So for a couple of months, I couldn't find a job suitable. And then you arrive in a new country, you don't know anybody, you have no money. And the only hope that you had was to at least develop your English and legal skills in an internship that ended up being a scam. So I was left with no other options really. And I was like, okay, well, you have two options here. I mean, let's try thinking about options. So you either go back to France, bearing in mind that, when you were looking for a job out there, you couldn't find anything, or you stay in the UK and you try to make it work. So I decided, which I did. Absolutely. Yeah, so I decided just to stay. I started to apply to legal positions. I couldn't find anything at the time. And obviously, London being London, I had to pay my bills, right? So I ended up working.
Thing about London. London forces you to find a solution.
Exactly. That's the blessings, really, is that, you have to make it work. Really, in London, you have no choice. Yeah. So I ended up working in a coffee shop for a couple of months.
Good. Wow. But here you are today, working hard at legal counsel. That's incredible. I love that story. I don't love it because you went through that trauma, but because there was an opportunity for you to have given up at that point. You were in a difficult position. You're like, you know what, I'm going to push through. And I think that says everything. It says everything for those people that don't go straight into a training contract or straight into, that. I knew a lot of people who had that opportunity to go straight in from one thing to the other. I was not one of those people. And you just keep knocking at the doors, don't you? And eventually something happens. So yeah, it's really great to hear someone else saying, yeah, I kept on knocking and there you are doing the job that you enjoy doing. Tell me, right, so you were telling me when we spoke about kind of the risk aversion of the French legal system. I imagine it's probably very similar to the English legal system. How has your view around risk from when you trained to now changed? And how do you deal with risk in a business that you're managing?
I guess law school doesn't prepare you to manage the risks. Unfortunately, I really believe that the legal education is lacking a lot of things. So you are being trained on becoming good legal practitioners, but you are not necessarily trained on how to apply your legal knowledge to the reality of the world. And I mean, obviously, from my perspective as an in-house lawyer, I kind of had to figure out myself, outside of law school, through my various experiences, how to liaise with various stakeholders of the organization. And something very basic that I've never heard in law school, for example, was the fact that when you do business, you take risks every day. You can't be running a business and not take risks. You will never be fully protected from reputational damages, legal actions, commercial disputes. Those things happen. So
you're very much in the arena. That's kind of the way in business, you're in the arena. You're not watching from the sidelines, and you don't know what's going to be in there, for sure. Yeah,
exactly. And I think, unfortunately, because I wasn't necessarily trained for it and prepared for it, you kind of have to get used to it and get on with it, as you grow and as you develop your experience in various organizations. And that's something that I'm learning to be comfortable with. And I think, again, because of the lack of risk management training in the legal education, personally, I always have this sort of paranoid based approach. I always feel there's something inside me that says, what if? But the truth of the matter is that even in a contract, you can never fully, you can't predict everything. It's not how it works. And eventually, when things go wrong, the parties can always find a compromise. They can always settle, because the reality is that the majority of the organizations wouldn't go to the courts to resolve a problem, because it's going to cost money. It's going to be obviously expensive and long, and it's not worth it in the long run. So, and that's something that I wish I had been trained on. But all you learn about in law school from a business standpoint would be bankruptcy, legal actions, breach of contract, all of those worst case scenarios.
The worst case scenario, which is when I guess, you might argue, well, that's when we get involved. But I think when you're in-house and you're working in the business, or you are the business owner, you get involved a lot earlier, which is kind of the preventative, proactive approach, which is something slightly different. Yeah, I imagine certainly for LPC, it's very much focused on private practice rather than in-house, when we were doing the LPC. So that's it. I love, this is what I've loved about watching you and your kind of posts on LinkedIn. I love the way that you explain this way of thinking to your clients, your business stakeholders. So why don't you say a little bit about that as kind of a lead into how you do things? You do things a little bit differently, don't you?
I do. I guess I've always been a black sheep, in a sense that, I felt that I never really belonged to the industry, or at least when I graduated. And I guess also because of the challenges that I faced, finding a job, but also because of my personality. So I remember an interview that I've had one day where the HR person who interviewed me with the head of legal was really good. That's, I guess, the only person who gave me a 30 minutes feedback, explaining to me how the reasons why I was unsuccessful. And one of his comments was to say, you should be a bit more professional. So I was a little junior at the time, and maybe, I guess he was right on certain things, but part of me also thinks that maybe I didn't fit into the cliche of what the in-house lawyer should be: very rigid, very boring, the no sayer. And I've never really fit those. I've never fit those boxes, and this is the reason why I'm different. So the way I usually interact with the business is I acknowledge the risk, even though it goes against my legal training, I guess. But I really try to understand and have some empathy towards them. So salespeople have targets. The company has to pay the bills, the wages. So the business has to keep going. And so I try to be as supportive as possible, which means obviously making things as simple as they can be. So I wouldn't trouble them with pages of emails, for example. I will always try to leverage visuals whenever possible. And this is what I do in my training, and this is what I do on LinkedIn. And I guess these are the posts that you are referring to. That's basically legal design. So I leverage the idea of basically the more accessible the legal matter can be, and the more it can be understood, and the more valued you are from a non-legal person. So this is what I do in my training. This is what I do in communicating to the team. No fluff, straight to the point, practical answers, easy to implement. That's my way of operating.
So I think clients appreciate that. A lot of clients say handhold. They like a bit of handholding, and just that bit, like, just explain to me what you mean and how does this relate to the issue, is so helpful, rather than, you know what, it's a cliche almost, because they don't want the long 50-page letter. But even in-house, sometimes the explanation can be overtly long. So it's great. Yeah, I've seen your pictures. I'll see if I can post some down there to give you, like, at the bottom, just to say, here are the details of your legal design, because you've done some great ones. I've seen them. The love story one was my favorite, I think.
The contract love story. The idea behind the idea behind the contract love story. So I came across. So I had a couple of people internally saying, I'm confused between, what is a CDA, what is a work order, what is the MSA, what is the LOI. There's so many acronyms, and I guess, for people who are not used to handle contracts on a daily basis, it can be quite misleading and quite hard to understand. So I just, started to kind of explain the various differences. And then I was like, well, actually, I was thinking, like, at the end of the day, those contracts do represent a form of relationship between the parties. And depending on the stage of the relationship, a contract will be, like, CDA would be more appropriate than an MSA, for example. And this is how this whole contract love story came along. And as opposed to say a CDA is a confidentiality agreement that is used to protect people, the parties' information, blah, 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 I've just used, I've compared a CDA to, a date in the real life. So if you are in a dating mode, you would speak to someone in confidence, and you wouldn't want anyone else to know about it. That's the CDA. That's the confidentiality agreement.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it kind of goes on.
I love it. And you've got so many great ideas. And do these ideas that kind of come to you because of the clients that come into you? That's amazing. Yeah, it's just really original. And I love that you share it. So please keep sharing all of that.
Thank you.
Tell me, is there any myth that you want to bust around either the legal profession or working in business? Any myths that come to you?
Oh, a lot of it. A lot of it. I think, obviously, my experience is very much about in-house. So I wouldn't know about the private practice world. But one myth that I would really like to kind of fight against would be the idea where, legal has to be boring and very difficult, not accessible. This is how we've been trained. We've been trained with a lot of law lectures that didn't necessarily make sense or were not practical at all, but that's not the way it has to be. We can prepare the future generation of lawyers to be a lot more practical, to have a lot more empathy towards their clients. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a service. We provide services, right? And yet we have no notion of customer service in the legal profession. Because I think historically, lawyers never really used to be challenged in what they do. The lawyers were always right. So I think there has never been this constant self-reflection thing that could happen maybe in other industries or in technology, where the whole purpose is to innovate. And I think that's something that is lacking, and that's something that I strongly believe should change in the future, because I think clients are also becoming increasingly more demanding as well. You know, they're expecting their lawyers to be quite hands-on and be a bit more proactive and provide practical solution, and don't say no to everything, because that's your job to say no. Your job is to advise me on the way forward and what are the risks associated to that and whether I'm happy to accept them or not. And I think this is a whole positioning, in my opinion, that needs to be readjusted.
It's like a value proposition for the legal profession, isn't it? It's saying, how are you adding value? Where are you actually solving the problems of a client, which is the business process. Awesome. I wanted to also ask you about my brain's just gone. But something that, no, because you talked about future. That was it. You said future. What changes are you seeing? What changes have you seen in the profession in the last, period of time you've been working? And what do you predict to be some of the changes that are going to occur going forward? 2 questions.
What I've already, I guess, noticed is I think the legal industry is accepting more and more the needs for change. Obviously, we can see a lot of changes around, obviously, technology. And there is a lot of, I guess, enthusiasm in the legal industry about, new softwares and, automation and everything that we could use to make our lives a lot easier. So that's, in my opinion, a positive change, because most of what we do is very manual. And this is where a tech tool could really help, and help us be more efficient with our time and focus on the core of our job, which is to provide legal advice. So that's already a great change that I've seen. I mean, I had never heard of legal tech back in 2014 when I graduated, for example. But I really insist on the fact that, you can have as many tools as you want. If the mindset across the profession doesn't change, you won't go as far as you would expect. I mean, it's much bigger than changing the way we work, whether manually or using a tool. It's about a shift has to occur, I guess, with also the way we deliver legal services, whether it's in-house, where we have to be a lot more business orientated. In private practice, obviously I'm a buyer of external legal services. And I think what really frustrates me at times is obviously I'm looking for straight to the point practical legal advice as well, because I don't have time to go through 50 pages. And sometimes, I've had instances where I have received a law lecture for what was supposed to be one question, and this is not what I'm expecting as a client. And equally, the billable hours model. I mean, we are already a cost center from a business perspective, so it's very difficult for us to outsource. And whenever we can outsource, if we go back to the management and say, oh, by the way, yes, it's going to cost between 50K and 100K, no, that's not going to work, is it? So I guess, the whole business model as well on the private practice side should change. So, but I've seen great progress.
Question on that one. If you had external providers who, instead of providing the 50-pager, were doing something like you do with the simple, would that be too far? Would that be a step too far? Because you're like, well, no, I don't need a pictorial version. I need just clear guidance. Or is that something that you'd be interested in?
I think I would very much like the idea. But I think, again, it depends on the legal advice that you are obviously outsourcing, because I guess maybe for certain specific advice, you would maybe require a bit more details, but on the flip side, I strongly believe that we've never really asked. I mean, I guess private lawyers in private practice haven't been trained for this, and have never really asked themselves the question, oh, but what about, you know, us creating a visual? And maybe asking the clients, you know, would you be interested in the visual? If an external law firm was to suggest that, I would definitely say yes, and see how, you know, see how.
That saves you translating it. It stops you from having to be the translator and allows them to directly speak to your business, which is really what you want, isn't it? It's like, can you, I mean, I guess there's a fine line, I'm thinking, between can we do this, sending a smiley emoji, yes you can, and you can't, which we were talking about, weren't we? It's like, yes you can, no you can't through Slack, is a simple thing, because they just want to know, can you do it or can't you do it? And if it's a no, then, you know, give me a reason why I can't do it, or tell me what I need to do. What are the conditions that need to be met in order for me to do it? That's different. But if it were coming to you, I mean, I wonder whether that's enough for us, whether you actually do want to know the thinking behind it, or whether it's like, no, just tell me whether we can do it in the first instance. So that is it's really interesting. Tell me personally, right? So I'm really interested in you as an individual. What are the things right now which, outside of your profession, what values or beliefs or philosophies are kind of holding you like grounded right now, that are holding you in a good space right now?
I guess maybe it's part of, I mean, I'm a very positive and optimistic person.
Right.
And I think you have to, because, you know, I guess nothing is easy in life, and we all go through challenges, whether it's, you know, at a personal level, at a professional level. You know, we can't really expect anything to be perfect. And I think I try to always look at the positives in a situation. And I guess, you know, the fact that I really struggled, and the fact that it took me 18 months to get a job, for example, gives me perspective. And I think perspective is key. So obviously right now we are in this whole COVID-19 situation, and yes, it's not ideal, but on the flip side, you know, it could be the opportunity for us to, you know, work differently. It could be the opportunity for us to allow ourselves to spend more time on certain things where we couldn't have in other circumstances. And it's not the end of the world. You know, at the end of the day, whenever things are tough for me, I always remind myself of my time in the coffee shop, and, you know, when I was crying every single day because I was wondering, you know, where I was going in my life. That's my main, I guess, philosophy. You know, being positive, having perspective, things will be eventually okay. And sometimes it takes time to realize the blessings.
It's interesting with a perfectionist conversation, because that's what I feel with certainly with a lot of people in this profession. There's a lot of perfectionism, and it's like, no, everything must be perfect. So I love that you've kind of got that easy, and maybe that's why you were perfectly kind of aligned. And I love this idea of being the black sheep. What would you tell other people that feel like black sheep within the profession, or generally? What would you say to them?
I mean, I would definitely say to them that it's okay to be a black sheep. It's okay to be yourself. I think we've been in a way trained on, you know, not showing anything that makes us stand out, or not showing anything that makes us different. I think it's a very traditional industry by nature. So something I would say to them is, you know, you belong somewhere, and you have to find it. You have to find where you belong, because otherwise you will always have that frustration, and you will never be fulfilled by whatever you do. You know, if you're not doing it with the way you want it to do. I mean, you know, the way you are, like, you know, it has to, whatever I do comes from me as a person. And I know, and I think this is something we have to accept, that we don't belong to every organization. So for example, I know that I would be potentially more suitable for a small business or a medium-sized business because of my personality and because of what I bring to the table, as opposed to maybe a bigger organization that is very process driven, for example. And that's okay. We don't have to tick boxes. We can be who we are, and we can be in the legal sector, and we don't have to be boring. It's perfectly fine. So yeah, I would say to those people to just go with the flow and just express themselves. And this is, I guess, how they could find happiness in what they do.
Awesome. So I think we will leave it on that, because that's a lovely message for anybody, frankly, anybody in any profession, but certainly for our profession. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me today. How can people get in contact with you? Can they get in contact with you on LinkedIn?
Anytime. So I'm on LinkedIn, so Sarah Ouis. For those who would like to reach out on LinkedIn. And I am also, so all the legal design things that I do, so the contract love story, but I've done a few others as well, are on Instagram on Very Lawyer Problems. So on Very Lawyer Problems, I share a lot of legal problems using humor and sarcasm. So that's another way to reach out.
Fabulous. Great. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you being here. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you enjoyed this talk with Sarah today. Reach out with her and find Very Lawyer Problems on Insta. All right. See you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Bye.